you mind if I'm dressed?
No, go.
Okay.
Trousers on. You said at the start, when you were introducing, that the film was kind of 10 years in gestation. And the film's part of a trilogy, which we'll talk about as well. But there seems to be a long way away, aren't we?
Should we get closer? Yeah, here we go.
No, there's a big hiatus.
We go way back.
A big hiatus between the last feature, Filthy Earth, and this one. Why so long? You know, why was this sort of troubled period getting Ivul onto the screen?
It's kind of par for the course. I think certainly making work like the work I made in this country. And having made Gallivant, it's weird, you know, 10 years ago Gallivant did incredibly well at film festivals, and certainly in Edinburgh I got lots of people suddenly very interested in what I was doing next. And I did have this idea to work on this Filthy Earth. Some of you might have seen this Filthy Earth, you know, Jason certainly has. And it kind of, the idea behind Ivul, which in English was always going to be called Off-Ground Heat, it was a kind of game that we used to play as kids. It kind of was germinating and was certainly something I wanted to do at that stage. But it kind of eventually morphed from a single screen piece into maybe an installation and performance, and I didn't really know what to do with it other than the fact that I wanted to write this script. So I collaborated with John Cheetham and Andy Mitchell and made the kind of first drafts together. And then it went, you know, the BBC committed to that, and it kind of went into, I guess, a vault onto a shelf, and then the BBC developed the digital channels, and I think it was just a piece of what they knew would be difficult. And in a way, that's why it took a while, and then you know, went to the lottery, and then Filthy Earth came out, and then people sort of like, oh, for fuck's sake, do you really want another one of those films? And so I think at that moment, when they thought, oh, for fuck's sake, for me, it was kind of quite reassuring to think, well, you know, this was going to always be a difficult piece of work. And I kind of thought, I felt quite relieved. I thought, I don't have to make it. That's great. I can go on with all the other stuff that I was doing. And then, 3 years ago, ED Distribution, the people that distribute the work in France, they've been approached by a young producer, Emily Blezner, who produced the film, who read the script and just fell madly in love with it. And next thing I knew, you know, there were meetings in Paris and down in the French Pyrenees, a bit of the world that I know really quite well. And then suddenly, it seemed to have a new life, but the gig, you know, the catch was that, you know, I had to translate it to French and in a way transpose this story into a completely different landscape. You know, which in hindsight was a good thing, because I adore that bit of the world. So that was, I think, the answer to your question.
Well, because I think that helps it. I mean, you kind of joined, there's like a diaspora of British filmmakers that are finding it hard to get their work financed here. Thomas Clay, who did Soy Cowboy, Ben Hopkins, is another example that are finding that they're going to work abroad. And I think that the work is enriched, and one of the things that I particularly liked about Ivul, and it seems different from some of the other work that you've done, I think the fact, the sensibility that it was in France gave it a kind of its own element. Was that something that you kind of fed off, the fact that you were working in, I know you know the area well, but did it feed into the work, working in this different environment?
Yeah, I think, you know, working with different languages, you know, again, I love language, you know, there's something about the way I play with language, and, you know, whether it be, you know, the single screen work or installations, and I've kind of got a massive archive, you know, both sonic and visual, of stuff that I know at some point will work its way into films, but or other work. But I think because it was in French, and because, in a way, the nuances of language still escapes me, you know, I'm still kind of guessing at so much of it. It meant that there were things that I think eventually worked their way into. I simplified it. I didn't get too complicated. And, you know, at the end, then, when you hear the kind of little collage of the end credits, which I must, you know, quickly thank the archive that is in the film is actually.
I think people are here actually.
Yeah, if Ian is here or Frank, they might still be there. I mean, that, you know, changed and transformed. But the kind of sonic components, which just creeped in at the very end there, kind of that little kind of collage, is I suspect if that was the whole film had been in English, there would have been a lot more of that kind of soundscaping. But there wasn't, so I kind of simplified it and kept the story simpler, kept the images simpler, and really kind of made a point of trying to tell a story. You know, I get very kind of bored at telling the story in the edit stage, and I'm equally as interested in what's going on in the background as the foreground. So.
I'm going to come back to that, but when we were having some, we were talking about this idea of topography and geography, which, you know, is a tradition that you've been kind of, not pigeonholing, but you've been put in that kind of category. But just in general, landscape and environment is tremendously important to you. I mean, how many people have seen Gallivant? Okay, over half.
Right.
Yeah. And this film here?
All the family, just all
yeah,
the
family, yeah. Less for this film here. But you know, in both of those films, you have a real dialogue with the landscape in which the film is set. And it's the same in this film, isn't it? It almost becomes like a character in itself, the environment in which you film.
Yeah, I think the landscape, you know, I think pretty well every film I've ever made, right back from Clippy Clop, has been me kind of confronting the landscape. I love the elemental. I like the idea of getting your hands dirty, you get cold, where you know, rain comes into the lens of the camera. All that stuff is just, for me, vital. It's a kind of corporeal experience. The making of it. I like to try and kind of convey some of that into the very fabric of the film, which is why sometimes the work is slightly berserk and it's got strange rhythms, because I'm equally as fascinated by the landscape as I am, you know, by the other things, i.e. the storytelling, which is conventionally what you do with cinema. You tell a story, the lights go out, and you tell a story, and everybody gets very entertained, and you know, you go home. But for me, it's just that, you know, that's one of many of the elements, one of the many components that I'm playing with. And to rewind briefly.
Let's do it.
Let's go for it.
Let's go.
You know, in terms of language, if people have seen this film, I think if that had been shot somewhere like Hungary, if we'd invented a language for it and there were English subtitles, I suspect, even myself, you know, because we tried that once as a little experiment, is that you kind of engage with it because it feels a little bit more exotic and because it's hard to locate or work out exactly where this place is. People are a lot more forgiving, including the makers and certainly the funders. But I think if you know, you realise it was shot in Yorkshire Dales, and you know, well, what is the agenda? You know, where are the cars? Are people? Where are the mobile phones? You know, where is this world? It can become very frustrating and annoying. But I think with Ivul it's slightly different because of the language and because of it's a fairy tale.
Because you played with language as well in the bass, for example, which is
in French we say la basse.
Oh, my French is terrible.
We never say bass like that.
I've disgraced myself.
Yeah.
One of the other motifs which occurs, and this film is dedicated to your mother, who kept the family together.
Yeah.
But you know, Gallivant, this film for you, perhaps less so, but in the wake of the Dead Dad, a project which you did that I'm very fond of. The idea of family, particularly patriarchy, is very important to you. I just wondered if you could say something about that in connection with your work, and particularly with Ivul, because it's very central.
Yeah, I think as well as landscape autobiography is, you know, I draw on my own life for kind of inspiration and kind of feed that back into the work. And certainly in the wake of Dead Dad was an exorcism of something that, you know, had troubled a very typical kind of relationship in many ways with the father. And I think in a way, Ivul, certainly Andre Ivul, the dad was a kind of dad that I always wished that I'd had, but I never did. You know, eccentric and strange and kind of wonderful and interesting. And I think that, you know, there are parallels between the two, but it's the kind of autobiographies, and in a way the reason it's dedicated to my mother is because, you know, my mother, like so many, I think, mothers of that generation, hold families together. The sacrifices that women make and continue to make of that generation are, you know, are quite unbelievable. You know, as an adolescent growing up, you kind of look back and think, how did she weather that? How did she get through that? Why are we still together? And she was the glue for the kind of imminent disintegration of the family. And I think as a result, you know, there were 5 siblings. We were incredibly kind of tight because of that, because of the experiences that we were going through. But without the mother, it would never happen. And I think that's another reason that certainly Marie in the film is just very different to my mother. But she falls apart. She cracks. You know, there's a moment where she's just had enough, and my mother really never ever got to that stage at all.
Was you a handful?
We were a handful, yeah.
I think your sister's here tonight, isn't she?
Yeah, my brother are also in the audience. Yeah, they're snogging at the back there.
And in terms, I mean, you mentioned Marie, and I don't know if this is indiscreet, but again, I mentioned that she reminded me very much of Tilda Swinton, and I think you were saying that Tilda was somebody that you were originally talking to for this. Yeah, I mean, Tilda's always been very supportive of my work, and she made contact with me years ago, just after Gallivant. I was very kind of keen to read scripts that I was working on. And I sent her, you know, a copy of Granny, as it was at the time, and she was really enthusiastic. And that's when the BBC had been making noises about getting people like Anthony Hopkins in to play, you know, the lead. You know, he was down for the role of Ivul, and so there was, yeah, he was somebody that we were trying to contact. I always preferred Bernard Cribbins. I thought Bernard Cribbins with his charities. Oh, is that right? Well, I spoke to him and he said, oh, not with the